So every year, African countries buy more than 55 billion US dollars worth of food from outside the continent. That is food imports to the tune of 55 billion US dollars. Let that sink in for a minute. So things like flour, canned tomatoes, rice, sugar, pasta, and what have you, cereal, many, many more, right? When you consider Africa's need for investment, I mean, inward flow of investment, that $55 billion is a huge grocery bill. It's a grocery bill Africa would rather not spend. And now African leaders would rather, they would rather grow and process more of their food locally to create home-based jobs, to create employment and expansion, economic expansions locally than churn out $55 billion to import food that can be grown on the continent. At the same time, big international farming companies and investors alike, they already seen an opportunity in this sector. And in 2023, they spent close to $8.5 billion injecting capital into the agriculture and agro-processing sector within the continent. That and what they were doing is that they were buying agro-processing plants or investing in agro-processing plants, buying farms, investing in warehouses and the entire agriculture and agro-processing value chain. And if international investors are willing to pour that much money into the continent of Africa, it shows how viable that sector is. And in this episode, we are going to unpack that which companies are investing what and by how much and in which regions and what is the investment going into, what areas are the investments going into, so that we can all pick a cue from their lead to be able to know which subsectors are super viable. That's all this content is all about. But before then, I have a report about successful market entry into Africa. So if you have an organization, a business, an investment firm, and you're looking to have a friction-free market entry into Africa, I have a 14-point checklist that you go through. Is going to tell you all the do's and the don'ts as far as African market entry is concerned. And that report is super comprehensive, I think about 16 pages, that will give you all that you need to be able to have a successful market entry into Africa so you don't have to make mistakes. And on top of that, we're also giving you access to one of our flagship tools at AfricaInsights.ai. It's called the Investment Opportunity Finder. Basically, you pull a country, you pull a sector, and it gives you comprehensive report about all the investment opportunities within that country and that sector. That is mind-blowing. So you can use the QR code on the screen or use the link in the description to get access to these free materials. And it's absolutely free for you alone. All right, let's get started let's jump in and dig deeper into it. So as I said, a lot of international investments are happening, especially in this area, and I'm super excited because of the potential to limit Africa's hard-earned foreign currency flowing out to just go and do grocery shopping. That is not correct. So what is happening is that we're going to look at some organizations. So as you can see on the screen, there's been a flurry of activities in terms of investment on the continent. So let me just show really quickly, right, what is available, what we're talking about here. So some of the investments that have gone on, some of them are mind blowing, right? So the first one is Transcow, Chinese EPC. Basically, it's a conglomeration of Chinese state-backed financial institutions that have poured. So they have invested. So let me just use this marker to mark what I'm talking about. So they've invested $135 million into the African agro sector. And where did that money go? Predominantly into Ivory Coast, so Cote d'Ivoire. And what did the money do? The money, they set up the largest cocoa processing plant, or the largest plant that grinds cocoa into what we call cocoa liquor, or it's like a paste. So what's happening, you're going to see it very shortly, that in as much as it's good to export cocoa to, to earn foreign currency, what is happening is that anytime an African company or country exports raw cocoa beans, they are leaving a chunk of money on the table. The real value is at least in the first level processing of the cocoa. That is grinding the cocoa into paste called the cocoa liquor. Anytime you grind, you export, anytime you grind the cocoa into cocoa liquor before exporting, you get 3 times the amount of revenue. So if anytime you export cocoa and you're getting $1,000, when it is ground into this cocoa liquor or paste, the revenue now moves from 1,000 to $3,000. That is how powerful processing is. So this plant in Ivory Coast is doing just that. So that's where that money went to. So the next one is Wilmar International, which is a Singapore-based company. It's been in Africa for many, many, many years, and they keep investing. Why? So we're going to find out. Their latest round of investment had to do with a $68 million facility that went to South Africa, and the entity they invested is called Richards Bay. Basically, there's a plant. They invested in a plant that processes crude oil, like palm oil, shea butter oil, or any of those kind of oils. They process them into refined edible oils, like cooking oil. So that is what that investment is about. Then the next one is British International Investment, BII for short. So they also investing heavily, this time in Nigeria, with an entity called John Vance Cocoa. So what they're doing is they are converting, is a plant that converts cocoa nibs into cocoa butter and cocoa powder. So that is it. Then the next one is EXEO Capital / or together with AgriVi Fund. These are two funds based in South Africa and the Netherlands. So they spent $10 million in Uganda. And I love what this investment went to do. It's basically investing in an entity called Amos Dairies. What do? They turn raw milk into milk powder and associated products. Another BII investment, that's the British International Investment Fund, is plus the Swedish fund, plus the North fund. They put in an $85 million injection to invest across multiple Pan-African countries. That's across the board in Africa. What did they do? To set up plants for processing grains, right? Poultry feed, and then fruits, fruit drying and those kind of things. So it's a conglomeration of different production settings that they invested in. Then the next one is Climate Fund Managers based in the Netherlands, right? So Climate Fund Managers, what did they do? $38 million investment also in Cote d'Ivoire. And this is also a very interesting investment. So this is a fund that helps, or it's a fund that went into a plant. What does the plant do? Converts cocoa shells, which basically is a waste product or a waste byproduct of processing cocoa. It's where they cut the cocoa, they take the fruit out and just throw the shells away. Instead of throwing the shell away to create an environmental mess, what this plant does is that converts these cocoa shells into bioenergy pellets. So they're like charcoal, very green. So in terms of green energy, it's one of the best forms of energy because it's preserve the environment, right? That's the bioenergy pellets. Then there's another investment for Wilmar again. Wilmar based in Singapore, right? And what that investment does is it says an undisclosed amount. Um, Let me put this thing down. Okay, so that goes into share nuts, so turning share nuts, right? Share nuts into shea butter and specialty fats, so like beauty products, beauty creams, and shea butter is very, very, very good base product for those kind of things. So that is for Wilma. Then the last one is, let me see. Hold on. Okay. Let me get this to disappear. Okay. So then the last one is Atlantic Cocoa, a new industry based in Cameroon. So they also are investing. They invested close to like 16 billion US dollars to cocoa grinding capacity in the country of Cameroon. All right. So then, the next slide is going to be talking about which sectors are seeing the most influx of foreign direct investment. So by 2023 estimates, this is the list. Cocoa processing, cocoa chocolate ingredient production, or that super subsector or subsector received the largest influx of foreign direct investment. To me, why? Cocoa, together with gold, their prices have escalated. It's just gone through the roof. So to me, they attracting the biggest investment is no brainer because that is where demand is, because the price of cocoa has just shot up through the roof. I think particularly recently because of all the chaos and the trade tariffs and things. So investors are pulling their money from more advanced countries to put into commodities that have got high appreciation value, and cocoa is one of them. Gold is one of them as well. So cocoa is one, and then edible oils, investment in edible oil crushing and refining. That is number two. Number three is dairy and cold chain. That is processing raw milk into frozen milk, or in Africa, milk powder or powdered milk. The powdered milk is a big thing in Africa because in many places, because of lack of access to constant electricity, you can't store fresh raw milk for a long time. It will go bad. So if it is processed into powdered milk, it stays longer. It has a massive, very long shelf life. So that's one of them. Then the next one is where money is going right now is grain milling and pasta making. Grain milling and pasta. The next on the list is fruit and vegetable drying and canning. That received like 9% of investment as of 2023 numbers. Then the next one, which is last but one, is sugar processing, starch, and its associated byproducts. Finally, we have brewing, animal feed, and then tea processing. Those are that's the amongst the top on the list. That's the last of the top on the list, right? So, what is attracting this investors in betting on African agro-processing sector like this? It's exciting, but we just want to peel a little bit deep into what is driving this. It's very, very simple. The first one, let me just pull my clicker. The first one is the value add gap. So basically, value add gap in the sense that Africa still exports 65% of its cocoa, cashew, coffee, and oilseeds raw as at 2023. They export that. 65% is raw. And as I said, anytime you export raw, you are leaving money on the table. And with all the debts and the deficits for many African countries, including West Africa, of course, they can't afford to leave money on the table like that. So the key is to process at least the first line of processing, to start processing to be able to unlock more revenue for their exports. And the World Bank says that for every 1 percentage point shift towards local first processing unlocks $450 million in extra profit or extra margins continent-wide. This is what it means. So it's saying that, for instance, Africa exported 65%, right, of its cocoa, cashew, coffee, oil seeds as of 2023. This is what that statement means. So if Africa now exports 64%, that 65% drops by just 1 point. That is, they export less, just 1 point less. That's 64% of its raw cocoa less. What happens is that for every 1 point that gets better, Africa unlocks, as a whole, unlocks $450 million continent-wide. Just think about that for a minute. Let us sink in a little bit, right? That is massive. So if we unlock a further, right, can you imagine that? It's over $2 billion of extra revenue that will come in. That is the power of value addition. Then the next thing is duty-free intra-African sales. This is exciting. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, one of the key achievements or the key things that they've negotiated across the entire continent, or at least the countries that have appended their signature to that agreement, is that the cost or the tariffs that typically are associated with exporting processed food on the continent has now dropped to anywhere between 0 to 5%. Now, what that means is that you can now set up a plant in any African country where there's adequate raw material, and let's say you set up a plant to produce, let's say, tomato paste in Nigeria. And that tomato paste, now when the plant is running, you can export to practically every African country for practically next to 0 tariffs. That is the power of it. And if that sinks in, that tells you the level of the kind of the breadth of the market potential for food, for processed food across the continent, right? So we're done with duty. Then the next one is import substitution pressure. So as we said, Africa has a food bill of 55 billion US dollars, right? 55 billion, that's a lot. So what is happening is that governments across the board have seen this and they want to eliminate this as much as possible, as quickly as they can, especially in this environment of tariffs and counter tariffs and trade wars and all those kind of things. Africa has seen that it is best to be able to trade amongst themselves, right? So what many countries are doing, that they are throwing incentives to make it easier for investors to invest their money in this sector, to be able to reduce the food import bill. So what they are doing is that there are companies that the countries that are introducing anywhere between 5 to 10% tax holidays for local processors. 5 to 10 years. I didn't say 5 to 10%. 5 to 10 years. Let me correct myself. 5 to 10 years tax holidays for local processors. A case in point, Ghana has introduced 0 VAT or 0 VAT for organizations that processes cocoa, that grinds cocoa into cocoa liquor or cocoa paste. 0 VAT rate. There are entities, there are countries like Tanzania that have introduced 7-year tax holiday. That's you pay no corporate income tax. CIT stands for corporate income tax. Corporate income tax for 7 years if you are into drying fruits for export. That is significant. The next one is climate smart premiums. This is part of the reason why these large investors are betting on Africa agro-processing. Why? Because lenders such as the British International Investment, that fund, or that it's a British development bank. Yes, it's a UK-based development bank, right? What they do is that, or as part of their mission, is to give cheaper loans, or what we call concessionary loans or concessionary debt. They all mean the same thing. This cheaper than the average market would give you. Very, very cheap. It will lend you this cheap money if you hit certain renewable energy milestones or performance indicators. Or the milestones or performance indicators could be, maybe you use solar powered plants for that factory, right? Or maybe you turn cocoa waste into renewable energy, or cocoa, like pellets or cocoa charcoal or whatever it is, right? So once you hit those kind of milestones, then your company is eligible for, let's say, a loan that will only cost like 2%, which you would never get anywhere. That's the power of it. So when you look at it, this combination of these four factors gives investors a massive boost to keep pouring money onto the continent. This, from here on, just going to talk about one or two investment opportunities that we can dive deep into, and to do the math to see where, if you are an investor, whether you'll be interested to also put your money here. So this is the opportunity details. Opportunity details is that by building small factories right next to farmers, so local farmers, like a cluster of smallholder farmers, right? So if they are growing, say, soybean, and you put a small factory that processes the soybean, right? Or if you have a small what do you call it, chilling plant next to a cattle rearing or a ranch area, a place that is known for ranching, so that you'll be able to help them process the milk, or take the milk from its raw state and refrigerate them or freeze them or whatever it is for the next set of production. That is huge, right? So that's one of them. So that's one of them. Then the second one is cocoa grinding expansion. That phenomenon has started taking place in Ghana and Ivory Coast, who predominantly control cocoa exports globally. Between those two countries, I think they probably would control at least half of cocoa exports globally. So by investing in a plant in Ghana or Ivory Coast, to where it is closer to the cocoa farms, so that when the cocoa is harvested, the cocoa is now transformed from raw beans into the cocoa liquor. That is this opportunity. And this will create jobs. Will create jobs, particularly in the rural areas where these kind of plants are going to be, where these local smallholder farmers are based. And let's look at how the mathematics of it, how investors would earn. So basically, as an investor, you would buy a part of a profitable food factory. And typically, it ranges from anywhere between 6 to 8 times its yearly earnings. 6 to 8 times earnings. The accountants call it EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So if the food processor or the cocoa grinding factory makes, say, $1 million a year, EBITDA, that is, their yearly earnings after deducting salaries, after deducting cost of inputs and what have you, and they are making, say, $1 million. Typically, the World Bank and Africa Development Bank has seen private equity investment with valuations of anywhere between 6 to 8 times the 1 million. So that farm or that entity or that factory will be worth anywhere between 6 to 8 million. So if you're going to be investing, so if you're going to be investing, if the value is 6 million and you are going to be investing, say, 600,000, that positions you to own about 10% of that business. That's what it's about. Then the next area that as an investor you can invest is also provide working capital. So the production, so if it's a factory, and the factory has customers or clients, sometimes the clients don't pay on time. They probably have a 90-day credit facility. So the company needs working capital to pay staff, to import materials, to buy basic inputs for the production process. That's all working capital. So this working capital note is about, as an investor, you can lend to these organizations in their local currency and charge anywhere about 10 to 12% as your interest as a working capital loan. That is super possible. And that is also possible. The risk is minimized when you hedge against foreign currency fluctuations. And any good investor knows about hedging. That is protecting the risk of foreign exchange rate misbehaving, or the exchange rate wiping away the value of the local investment. So that's one of them. But it makes it even more sweeter if this food processing company has an offtake agreement with maybe a supermarket. The supermarket signs an agreement with the food company, say that, hey, look, whatever you're going to be producing, maybe you sell tomato paste. I keep using that as an example. So there's tomato paste, and that tomato paste, they said, okay, within the next 3 to 5 years, or within the next 3 years, or within the next 5 years. It's an agreement that is done up front. All your products, that all the output of your factory, we, the supermarket, we're going to buy it off you. Right? Everything you sell, we're going to buy. Everything that you produce from the factory, we're going to be buying. Or 80, 90%. So the good thing is that it helps the supermarket lock in good pricing for a long time, so that pricing are not just moving up and down. They do a fixed term contract with kind of a very kind of a fixed price contract. And then the factory also is guaranteed cash flow. They are guaranteed that at least for the next 3 to 5 years, they don't really have to worry. They just come to produce and produce and produce because there's a ready buyer. If the business is like that, then finding an investor to be able to put in this kind of investment is a no-brainer. It's very, very easy. All right. So before we jump to the next slide, once again, if you haven't downloaded our African market entry report, do so now. It's a report that shows you all the things you need to do and not do to enter African market. It's a comprehensive checklist, a report that details the exact steps you need to take to be able to have a frictionless market entry into Africa. You can download that report through the description below or via the QR code on the screen. Again, AfricaInsights.ai are one of our flagship tools. Amongst out, we have a dozen tools for doing all sort of amazing market intelligence research on the continent of Africa by far. And one of our tools is called the Investment Opportunities Finder. We're giving you limited access to it for free that you can use to be able to find out what investment opportunities pertain to any of the 54 African countries in 18 different sectors. If you love it, you can download that right now or get access to it via the QR code or the link in the description. All right. So jumping on to the next. So we are looking at, so for this investment, what is the ticket and the return? Very simple. So if you have a mid-sized milling plant, you're looking at an investment of, let's say, around $10 million. And with $10 million, this is what happens. You spend $10 million on, let's say, a flour mill. And once you lock in grain prices, that is the input hedges, that is you negotiate with smallholder farmers for a long-term contract, so that for every what do you call it, wheat, if it's wheat that they are producing to feed the flour mill, for every tonnage of wheat they produce, you pre-buy it, or they pre-sell it to you at a fixed price over a long-term period, right? That's what it means. That's what the input hedge means. So if you have that in place, the earnings are typically about 15 to 22%, right? So for every $100 you invest, every year you'll be earning between 15 to 22%. Obviously, you need to do your own due diligence, but these are some of the estimation that the African Development Bank and World Bank have put forward for investors. Right? And then for export grade fruit drying, so if you want to invest into a drying facility that dries like pineapples, mangoes, and bananas and things and export them, you are looking at a $5 million-ish kind of investment, and then a payback, a very fast payback of under 4 years. You get your money back. That to me is lucrative. It's amazing. Now, for every investment, as I do this content, I always show you the risks and the fixes. For every investment, there are risks. So the main ones that I see, there may be more, but the ones that I see are crop supply swings. So that means you set up the factory, you started the factory, and then those who are supplying you the input into your factory, their yield goes down or something happens and they are not able to supply enough raw materials to feed your factory. That obviously is a risk. And in this case, how to mitigate that is contract farming with fixed price band. That is, you contract with a lot of farmers within that local area. You set up a fixed price over a period of time, and it mitigates that for you. Then the other one is forex shortage for machinery. So you want to buy machinery or machinery parts that are not available in Africa. They are available probably China or Germany or anywhere else that uses euros or US dollars to buy. And you need to convert your local currency, let's say CD or a naira or a shilling, into foreign exchange to be able to buy those machinery. One of the ways that I've seen it done in many other places that they rather use the local bank. The local bank buys the machine, and then the factory leases the machine from the bank and pays them in local currency. So the bank pays for maybe the $800,000 equipment and then leases it over its lifespan to a factory, and the factory pays every month in naira or cedi. That becomes very easy for everybody. All right, if you love this kind of content, this type of content where I break down investment opportunities and ideas and all the nuances surrounding it, let me know. Put it in the comment that you love so that I will keep doing these things because I enjoy doing them. All right, with that said, I will implore you to download that report if you want it. That is the Africa Market Entry Report. Is free. So it's a very detailed, comprehensive report about all the things you need, all the things you need to do, all the points you need to check to be able to know that you will have a frictionless market entry into Africa. Awesome. Thanks for watching.